Right everyone, it is Finn here and welcome back to another World Cup video, where today we're going to be mentioning one World Cup player that each Premier League club needs to buy. Obviously the World Cup has just come to an end and I thought, what better time than just before the transfer window? Obviously with 20 Premier League clubs to talk about, we also have 20 teams to talk about, so let's jump straight into things. But before we do just that, let me not forget to remind you guys to put in the comment section down below which Premier League club do you support, and if you could get one World Cup player, who would it be? Once again, this is just going to be my opinion, and although I am going to base it off of stats, we're all going to have a different opinion, so I'm interested to see what you guys say. But jumping into club number one, we have Wolverhampton Wanderers. In terms of the order we're going to do this, we're going to be working our way up the Premier League table from 20th to 1st, and as I said, rock bottom, we have Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, of course, I want to make the long-running joke that it should be a Portuguese player, but bottom of the Premier League, I don't think it's likely. I think in terms of a player that they need to get in their squad, has to be Cameroonian, 27-year-old centre-back, Castelletto. Now, obviously, as you guys know, I've done quite a bit of African content on my channel over the last year or two, so there are going to be quite a few African names in this video. I do understand how absolutely underrated they are, and the sad reality is for African football, or I guess it could be a good thing to an extent, is the fact that African players are cheaper than European players, and for teams like Wolverhampton Wanderers who are struggling, they do need those affordable players. As I said, look here, Castelletto was brilliant at the World Cup as a proper ball-playing centre-back, and in this Wolverhampton Wanderers system would fit them perfectly. Got a brilliant goal versus Serbia, showed that he can be ruthless in the air, and as I said, for about £4 million would be an absolute steal. I still think the fact that Wolverhampton Wanderers got rid of Conor Cody and Romain Saiss in one transfer window, absolutely criminal. Someone should get arrested for that, but at the end of the day, as I said, Castelletto will be your man. Next up in 19th place, we have Southampton, and I've gone for Ludini from Tunisia. Of course, it is another African player, and as I said, they're not all going to be African players, I really do promise you that, but obviously, as I said, lower down on the table, these are more affordable players, and I almost view Ludini to be a more affordable option than Amrabat from Morocco. He puts in the crunching tackles, he was brilliant for Tunisia throughout this tournament, and really did impress me. Once again, only about £4 million and would be the perfect replacement for Romeo, who recently left Southampton. Once again, totally underrated player, could move to any club in the world in my opinion, currently playing in the Hungarian league, which once again, I do believe he does deserve top quality football, and for a team like Southampton, he could make the difference. Now, moving on to our next club, I promise you guys, it's not another African player, as it is Nottingham Forest. Now, I say it's not an African player, in fact, it's no player at all, as I've selected no one for Nottingham Forest. I'm sorry, but a team that has bought 22 players so far this season, and we're only mid-season, who has revamped their team twice over the season, I can't say they deserve to get a single another player. Once again, if you can't change things around with 22 players, I'm not sure that one more will make the difference. But jumping straight into another team, I'm sorry, it is another African player, as it is going to be Everton with Buffon.
You're joking. Not another one?
Now, as I said, I do promise you this is the last African player we're going to have for a while at least. And looking at Buffon, absolutely brilliant for Morocco. No, he didn't get goals and assists at the World Cup for them, but he had the best work rate out of any of them, and I would almost consider him to be their most crucial attacker from time to time. As I said, he's got a very high work rate, he's got the Premier League experience from when he was at Southampton, and for Unger this season, getting 3 goals and 3 assists in 11 games once again, such an impressive player, and I believe he could make the difference for Everton. As we know, since they got rid of Richarlison, they don't really have a really out-and-out kind of striker up front. And looking at a player like Buffon, he can play absolutely anywhere in the front three. He can even play as an attacking midfielder. And as I said, an absolute bargain steal for a team like Everton. They could probably get him for around £8 million, which, by the way, all the values I'm going to be mentioning in this video are based off of transfer market. And they don't necessarily mean that that's how much these players go for, their market value. I do believe it depends on how much they value to the club. So a player like Buffon could still move for about 25 million, but once again, if he's marketed value at £8 million, an absolute steal. Now, moving on to our next player, it's not going to be an African, as it is going to be Sosa from Croatia moving to West Ham. Looking at this West Ham team, as we know, they've got quality throughout. They've got an absolutely brilliant squad. They've just been underperforming. So it's really hard to choose which player would make the difference. But obviously, looking at that left-back position, Cresswell is getting a bit older. Masuaku recently left to Besiktas. So I do think they need a top-quality left-back. And who other than 24-year-old Croatian Sosa? Once again, 8 assists in 21 games for Stuttgart this season. Absolutely brilliant. And I would say he's very typical of a modern-day fullback. At the World Cup, he was very impressive in holding down Brazil's attack, and as I said, in terms of the Premier League, I believe he could get West Ham United back to where they deserve. Now, moving on to our next club, we've got Leeds United, currently 15th place, and a very difficult club to talk about. Initially, I was so tempted to add another attacker, but at the end of the day, I think if there's one problem Leeds don't have, it is attacking options, and they so badly need another centre-back, which is why I've gone for, now I do apologize for the pronunciation, but I've gone for Pavlovic, the 21-year-old Serbian centre-back. As you know, an absolute beast of a player, 6'4". He's fast, he suits the style of play of Leeds because he's very good at distributing the ball during really fast counter attacks, which you're going to hear me say this once or twice throughout the video in terms of centre-backs needing to be good playing ball centre-backs. That's because in modern day football, as you know, the centre-backs play such a huge role in starting that counter attack football, which is so popular in modern day football. But as I said, looking at a player like Pavlovic, absolutely lethal, obviously with RB Leipzig at the moment. At 21 years old. As we know, Leeds United have a very good connection with RB Leipzig, and it just seems to be a match made in heaven. Now, moving on, we do have Bournemouth, and once again, it is going to be another centre-back, as it is going to be Piero Hincapié, the 20-year-old, obviously playing for Valencia at club level. He's playing for Bayer Leverkusen, and he is just such a solid option. The fact that at 20 years old, he already has 24 caps for Ecuador should show you at what a high level he plays for. Played every single minute for Ecuador at this World Cup. Once again, just proves how much of an important player he is. He's very fast on the ball, he's very technically gifted, which, as I said, for modern day centre-backs is very important, and I believe he would make the difference for a team like Bournemouth, who have been impressive this season already. They just need another defensive option. In terms of the next team we're going to be talking about, it is going to be the Foxes with Leicester City, and you're not going to believe it is going to be our first and maybe only repeat of the video, as I've gone for Hincapié once again, very solid centre-back, 20 years old. Even if a team like Leicester City or Bournemouth held on to him for 1 or 2 years and sold him for a massive profit, I believe that would also make a lot of sense. But Leicester City being way down on the list compared to where they would want to. Obviously, Leicester City used to fighting for Champions League football, now 13th. That's not where they'll be happy with. And really losing a lot of their major centre-backs, or their centre-backs losing form over the last year or two. They are not where they want to be at the moment. They do need a top quality centre-back, maybe 1 or 2 replacements in those attacking areas for when Jamie Vardy eventually moves on. Although I wouldn't be surprised at this rate if he plays until he's 52 years old.
I am inevitable.
But as I said, Hincapié, as a young centre-back who's looking very, very promising, I do believe he'll be perfect for Leicester City. Now, moving on, we've got Aston Villa. Now, when looking at this Aston Villa team, they've been so impressive since Unai Emery took over, and it's kind of hard to say where they should improve. I do think in terms of the player, I mean, it's not going to be their goalkeeper, to be honest with you. I mean, I would keep him around even if he wasn't good for his celebration. But looking at this team, if I had to pinpoint one weak spot for them, it would be their right midfield position. And I'm going to link them to a player who they have been linked with in real life, with Ismaila Sarr. Obviously, the 24-year-old right wing for Senegal. He was really, really good in my opinion at the World Cup. No, he didn't get that many goals. He got 1 goal and it was a penalty. But at the end of the day, I don't think Senegal utilized him correctly. There was a lot of pressure on him to replace Sadio Mane after his injury, and I don't think that they got the ball to him enough. But in terms of a lethal attacker up front who really had those promising chances, no one had more for Senegal than Sarr. Obviously, when it comes to Watford, he really gets the goals and assists on a very regular basis. Unfortunately, we didn't see him too much in the Premier League last season, as he did have an injury, and he is a very injury-prone player, which is my only worry for him. But in terms of a great attacking option, if you get him on one side with Leon Bailey on the other side, and probably Danny Ings up front, once again, this Aston Villa team could really go places. Now, moving on to our next team, we've got Crystal Palace, which in terms of Crystal Palace, there's only one position that I really look at that is struggling, and it is their right back position. I mean, they've got Nathaniel Klein there still, who's far past his expiry date, and in terms of a replacement, I've gone for Juranovic, the Celtic 27-year-old right back who plays for Croatia. Once again, in terms of a player from Croatia, there's going to be a lot of Croatians in this team, because I feel like much like nations from Africa, it is a nation that you can get affordable players from. Because looking at Juranovic, considering in my opinion, he was one of the best right backs of the tournament, 6.5 million as a set value is absolutely shocking, considering he's been linked to both Atletico Madrid and Barcelona. Whether he'll take a move to Crystal Palace, once again, not convinced about it. But remember, this pull of the Premier League can be so strong, and absolutely anyone would want that dream. In terms of a modern day fullback, he can almost play in that right midfield position, so getting up and down the flank wouldn't be hard for Juranovic, especially considering how promising and young attacking this Crystal Palace team is. As I said, Juranovic would be perfect in my opinion. Next up, we've got Fulham, who, in terms of a player, I know this might sound very, very weird, but I've gone for Cho, the young attacker who played for South Korea at the World Cup. I mean, his 2 goals versus Ghana really proved to me that he's got so much promise. Yes, I know he won't immediately be a starting player for Fulham, but I believe a player like Mitrovic is going to move on eventually. As we know, one of the best strikers out there, and they do need a replacement striker for him. I do believe in the interim, they need a player like Cho, who could really build and learn under a player like Mitrovic. The fact that he is still playing in the South Korean league is absolutely shocking for me, and he does deserve top quality football. As I said, those 2 goals versus Ghana were out of this world, and the fact that he's only valued at £1.4 million, if they can get him for anywhere near that, even a fraction of that, it would be a massive steal. Now, breaking more into the top 10, we do have 9th place with Brentford, which I'm not going to lie, initially I was kind of looking at Juranovic as well, but I have gone for what I believe could be the best Christian Eriksen replacement from last season since he left. In that attacking midfield position, I've gone for Lovre. Once again, another Croatian, only 24 years old, and despite his limited time at the World Cup, the Ren attacking midfielder was brilliant when he did get game time. I think he only played 1 full 90 minutes or something stupid like that, which considering he scored a goal with only 4 minutes of play versus Canada and was only given 1 minute after that to play versus Belgium, shows how underutilized he truly was. I think if they played him on a more regular basis, that maybe Croatia could have made it to their 2nd final in a row. Once again, looking at a player like him, only 24 years old, so versatile, can play in those attacking areas, can play as an attacking midfielder. I do believe he'll slot perfectly behind Ivan Toney.
I don't know. I think that's a bit dodgy, mate.
Once again, guys, if you have any disagreements, let me know down below what you guys think about my picks. Now, moving on, I can't believe I'm saying it, but in 8th place, we've got Chelsea. The fact that Chelsea are in 8th place is mind-blowing to me, and there's only one player who can do the job. Once again, being so heavily linked in real life, it is going to be, yet again, another Croatian with Gvardiol, who at 20 years old, I would argue the best centre-back in the entire World Cup, which at 20 years old is really kind of saying something, to be honest with you. Playing at RB Leipzig has a set value of about £60 million, but is also in the race at Manchester City at the moment. So Man City and Chelsea, the battle of the Blues to really battle it out. I could almost see a player like him move for almost £100 million.
What did he say?
He is that good. Once again, remember the name, although I guess it's kind of hard to put a face to the name when he wears a mask the whole tournament. But as I said, the RB Leipzig centre-back has been so promising, and he would make the difference for Chelsea. As we know, recently lost Antonio Rudiger, that's been a huge loss for them. Thiago Silva, although brilliant, is really getting on at the moment, and they do need him in that centre-back position. Now, moving into a top 7 place, which once again, the further and higher up you get on the pitch, it was almost more difficult for me to make some decisions. And when we move on, we have Brighton, which I'm going to say a name that is going to sound very weird. And I know I'm going to get a few eyebrows raised because I have Harry Southampton. I think that's how you pronounce it, the 24-year-old Australian centre-back, which I promise you guys, or I bet you guys didn't expect any Australian tie-up on this list. But as we know, Brighton have always kind of had a good history with Australians, whether it be Matt Ryan, whether it be Aaron Moy, but I actually didn't do it on purpose. I think looking at Southampton as a centre-back was absolutely brilliant. A 6'6" centre-back, which considering how much of a beast he is in terms of the size, is also very fast. And once again, I'm going to say it's a proper ball-playing centre-back. I do believe he'll really complement Lewis Dunk's style of play and would even be a good replacement for him as he is getting older. Once again, there are a few other players I wanted to mention here. Maybe Nathan Aka on loan could go to Brighton, maybe Enner Valencia as a striker option. But at the end of the day, I do feel like Southampton would be a great option, only 24 years old, currently playing for Stoke in the Championship, could be relatively affordable with a value of 4.5 million. Once again, as I said, let me know what you guys think. But ladies and gentlemen, now we do head into that top 6 spot. As we know, the top 6 are always very interesting. And we start off with Liverpool, and I once again have a player who's been heavily linked to them. And I have Mohamed Kudus, as we know, absolutely brilliant, the young Black Stars of Ghana youngster. Because looking at Kudus, 2 goals in 3 games in the World Cup for Ghana, can play in an attacking midfield position, any of the winger positions, which with this current Liverpool squad, the fact that they do have aging players there, they've never really had a proper attacking midfielder, I do believe Kudus would be the perfect option for them. Even in terms of what he's done for Ajax this season, 10 goals in 21 games for Ajax, including some goals versus Liverpool in the Champions League, I do believe he is showing some real promise and he does deserve Premier League football. I believe if he moved to the Premier League, he could almost go down as Ghana's best player of all time. I know it's a big shout, but he is so promising, the 22-year-old. Now, moving from Liverpool to my club, Manchester United, which, yes, I know I'm wearing an Argentina jersey that kind of looks like Manchester City. I almost heavily regret that. But looking at Manchester United, without a doubt, their main problem in this team is that striker position. Now that Cristiano Ronaldo is out, I've got another Portuguese player in mind, as it has to be Giancarlo Ramos, 21-year-old striker for Benfica, who, I mean, in terms of his numbers, a hat-trick and an assist versus Switzerland alone. He looked so good for Benfica this season. 17 goals and 7 assists in 25 games is not bad by any means, and a proper striker is exactly what Manchester United need. I mean, in terms of their market value here, they say he should be about £24 million. I can't see United getting for anything less than £100 million, but I believe he could be the striker that Manchester United need. At only 21 years old, could be an absolute bargain. Now, jumping into those kinds of Champions League spots, we have Tottenham Hotspurs. Now, when looking at Tottenham Hotspurs, I initially wanted to use a centre-back, but now they've got a World Cup winning centre-back, which is kind of weird to say about Tottenham Hotspurs. So I have gone for their right-back, and I'm going to go for Denzel Dumfries. 26 years old, I feel like in the last 2 to 3 major national team tournaments, he has been in the team of the tournament, and rightfully so. In terms of goals, in terms of assists, he always contributes. In terms of playing for Inter, he has worked under Antonio Conte before, and as a right wing back, as a right midfielder, or as a right back, would perfectly fit this Tottenham Hotspur system, and I believe he's Premier League ready. As I said, only 26 years old, and would be a brilliant transfer for Tottenham Hotspurs. Now moving on to third place, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but it is Newcastle United. Now this Newcastle United team, the richest club in world football, what is the player that's really going to transform them into title contenders? It is going to be a man who's also be linked to Liverpool, as it has to be Sofiane Amrabat, and Sofiane perfectly describes the style of play, because that defensive midfielder for Morocco, I will say this, I believe he was the best defensive midfielder, maybe even the best midfielder at the World Cup. Puts in the crunching tackles, made the absolute difference for Morocco, whether it be versus Croatia, whether it be no matter who it played, whether it be versus Belgium. He made the difference. He won the possession back every single time Morocco lost it, and I believe he deserves to play for a top Premier League club. Currently playing for Fiorentina in the Italian league, but as I said, has been linked to recent Premier League winners Liverpool, so that really shows how high up he's gone in the register list. Now, in terms of the Premier League top 2, this is where it gets really juicy, as we have Manchester City next. Now, what do you get for a team that don't just have the best player in every position in the world, but have the best 2 players in every position in the world? I mean, you've got Erling Haaland as a striker, and as a backup, you've got Alvarez. I mean, can we just talk about how absolutely mental that is? But in terms of a player for them, it was relatively easy, believe it or not, as I've gone for Frankie de Jong. Yes, it would break me as a Manchester United fan, but looking at Frankie de Jong, especially, I think a good example of that would be the game versus Senegal. He absolutely runs the show. As you know, one of the best creative midfielders out there, current worth of about 45 to 65 million pounds, although he could definitely go for 100 million pounds. I believe he would be the perfect Gundogan replacement once he moves on. And on top of that, Kevin De Bruyne is also not getting younger, so I believe it would be perfect for him to get in those shoe steps before those players leave. Also looking at Pep Guardiola, plays a tiki-taka style of football, much like Barcelona, so it really is the perfect fit for Frankie de Jong. But, ladies and gentlemen, now we move on to our final club of the video, as it is going to be Arsenal. And yes, although Arsenal have some brilliant players within their attack, I've gone for Cody Gakpo. Obviously, the Netherlands attacker got 3 goals in 5 World Cup games for Netherlands. In terms of his Eredivisie contributions for PSV, has gotten 9 goals and 12 assists in 14 games. An absolute beast of a player, only 23 years old, and I believe he would be the final product to this brilliant Arsenal attack. He could be the player to take them to their first Premier League win in absolute ages. Once again, as I said, I'm not saying that any of the players in the Arsenal attack aren't good enough, but they are kind of lacking that depth in there. If there are any injuries, they could be in some real trouble. And on top of that, a little bit of competition up front or in any position is never bad. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much it for today's video in terms of a World Cup player that each Premier League team should buy. Obviously, if you guys have any suggestions, let me know down below if there are any changes you would make. And of course, along with that, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. It really does help the channel out. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers. Still, it's been a while, but I know we'll get there eventually. And guys, this has been Finn, FYNN. Until next time, cheers.